The heroine remembered her past life, but it wasn't always like that. Her head hurt like hell, and she was surprised by the sound of crying and remembered everything. Perhaps the baby's cry was the catalyst in her past life. She was a kindergarten teacher, and as an orphan, she died of overwork due to frequent overtime. God must have felt sorry for her. The family she was reborn into was pretty good. Her new father was a rich count, and her mom was a beauty. Life in this family was like a picture. The only problem for her new one was that she thought she was in some kind of novel, and she must be the main character, but unfortunately not. In this world, there could only be one person with the role of protagonist, whose disappearance could make everyone sad. So she was the villain here. Her name was Evelyn Monstera. Evelyn saw Jane and ran up to her. Then Jane asked her if she was admiring the portrait again, and if so, she told her to be careful, and Evelyn said she would be careful. Jane decided to ask the girl where she was going, and Evelina said she was going to her mother's house. Evelina herself thought that the character Evelina could not be called a villain. Maybe it was because of childhood friends who organized a date of the main characters, but she fell in love with the hero at first sight and became terribly jealous of them. That's why she became a pathetic villain who was punished by the returning adult protagonist. Walking down the hallway, Evelina thought it was so poignant and interesting when she read about it, but becoming Evelina such a prospect began to scare her. The protagonist will confiscate their family fortune, and as a result, they will be poor, and they will not be helped even by the sale of the title. In short, in a word, after the appearance of the protagonist, goodbye, and their cozy home, and all that she enjoyed and lived, and her life will go on a crooked path. Evelina did not want to say goodbye to her cozy life, but she was Evelina from the novel, and that's why she thought if she could live differently, she would not fall in love with the main character at first sight, and would not torment the heroine, but would help them to get along and everything would be fine. Evelina came to the door and thought about the fact that she would attend the succession lessons and inherit her father's fortune and live the life of an aristocrat. The girl had already entered the room where her mommy was and immediately ran to hug her and asked if her mom had called her. It seemed to her mommy that their Evelina was getting nicer every day and told her that next week a guest was coming. Evelina wondered what kind of guest he was, and then her mother said that he was the son of a man her mother had been good friends with before her marriage. But he was a little weak, so he would be staying at their castle for a while. Evelina immediately tensed up and asked her mom what his name was. She was asking about the one who was staying with them. She wanted to know what his name was. Then her mother realized who her daughter was asking about, and Evelina hoped it wasn't him. But her mother said it was Cassius Wren Walker. He was a young gentleman from the ducal family. Evelina couldn't believe it, because she knew there would be no exceptions. Cassius Wren Walker was the protagonist of the novel that was on its way to their home. Later, when Evelina was sitting in the garden, she watched the other children playing with each other and thought that she knew the future, so she thought there would be no surprises, but didn't understand why she kept worrying. Suddenly, a man came up to her and asked her if she was going to play spots anymore, and Evelina said she didn't want to as she enjoyed watching more. Her body was young and full of energy now, so she had to play often, but sometimes when she felt insecure, she needed time to sit and think. If she remembered her past life, and if she didn't come to her senses, she would really act like a real child. Suddenly, Evelina's thoughts were interrupted by a girl with golden hair who just ran into her and then sat down next to her and started to catch her breath as she was out of breath. This girl was Elisa Poem, who thought that Evelina was very nice, and also this girl was the first love of the main character. Elisa's and Evelina's homes were close to each other, but Elisa's parents worked for Evelina's father, so from ancient times there were often cultural exchanges between the two families. Still, Evelina from the novel did not like Elisa because she was more distinguished by her talents and beauty, so Evelina kept Elisa to herself and treated her as a servant. But now Evelina had no such thoughts, so she hugged Elisa because she didn't understand how she could write about jealousy and envy for such a cute child. Elisa decided to ask Evelina if she could come to their house tomorrow. She wanted to bake cookies that she liked so much, and only Evelina wanted to say yes as she remembered that they had a guest coming, so she had to refuse. But Elisa wondered what that guest was. Evelina began to tell that it was a nobleman from the capital, and she heard that he was their age, and it looked like he would stay in her house for a while. She also promised that she would introduce them later when everything was settled. Elisa listened attentively, but then suddenly puffed up her cheeks. She told Evelyn that it was great that he was going to live with her, but Evelina saw the change in her mood and didn't understand if Elisa was jealous of her. But usually at those ages, children were especially obsessed with their peers. So she put her hand over Alicia's and said it was okay, but Alicia didn't know what she was talking about. Evelina said that even though they had a guest, she was still her closest friend, and Evelina told Elisa that she should have known that she liked her best, which made Elisa very sad, and she let out a tear and threw herself into her arms and told her that she liked Evelina best too. At the same moment, Evelina thought that even if she got to know the protagonist better, she would only hinder their relationship and the protagonist would deal with her. Evelina got very close to Elisa, but she wanted them to be a perfect couple. One sunny day, a boy with white hair got off the train and a suitcase in his hands, and when he exhaled deeply, he realized that he was Montes. Evelina and her mother and the servants were already standing near the entrance to the castle and welcomed the guest. The girl kept thinking that this moment would never come, but it had to happen. Mom turned to her daughter and asked if everything was all right, and Evelina, frightened by the sudden question, said that everything was fine and she was just very worried. The mother smiled understandingly and said that she thought her daughter was happy to have a new friend, and Evelina threw her hands up in the air and said yes, but she wasn't really happy. At last, they heard and saw the sound of hoofs and the sound of rushing carriage wheels approaching, and when it finally stopped, he stepped out of the opening door, and Evelina's breath caught. Pale skin with sparkling blue eyes and glossy lips, he looked so beautiful it was no wonder Evelina fell in love with him at first sight. The boy was immediately greeted by Countess Monstera. In his first love, Cassis was weak in body, helpless and sensitive. He often brought Evelina to tears, but after growing up, he returned to being a beast of tears in a different way. When Cassis stood in front of Evelina, she shook her head and thought that she had already been conquered by that look and didn't understand why he was like that, because he was only 12 years old. Suddenly, she realized that he was looking at her sullenly and suddenly asked the Countess if it was her daughter, and she gladly introduced her and asked Evelina to say hello to him. Evelina Monstera extended her hand to him and said it was a pleasure to meet him, and Cassis responded by extending and shaking her hand and said it was a pleasure to meet her too. The Countess also said that she had seen him as a child, and now she was so grown up, and she thought he must be tired from the road, but Cassis immediately said that he could take care of himself. Eventually, Cassis settled in the VIP room far away from Evelina's room, and it was because she had been preparing for a long time to get rid of the contact with Cassis, because Evelina knew that to defeat the enemy, it was necessary to study him. Only Evelina wanted to watch him from a distance, as behind her back appeared a figure that called out to her, and when she turned around from surprise, she was stunned. The guy apologized for scaring her because he thought that maybe she needed help. Evelina looked at the guy and realized it was Paul, Cassis's servant. Evelina hurried to say that she didn't need help, she just wanted to play hide and seek. That's why she was alone, and suddenly Paul asked if he could join the game. Evelina thought for a moment, because if she refused, it could be suspicious, and so she answered positively and told Paul that he would look for her and she would hide. Paul turned his back to the wall and closed his eyes and started counting. But Evelina ran to hide and thought that she had started the hiding by accident. But if she had started, she should have tried harder. Evelina ran to the big doors, as Paul didn't know that the best place to hide was in the study, and here she decided to hide. And as soon as she ran behind the corner of the bookcase, Paul finished counting and said that he was going to look for her. While she was hiding behind the bookcase and wondering when Paul would find her, she heard some strange sound, and then she decided to look around the corner where the sound was coming from and saw it was Cassis, who was taking a book from the shelf. Evelina didn't understand why he was here, and just at that moment, Cassis started to move towards her and she thought she should run, and just as she was about to follow her plan, he noticed her and asked her what she was doing there. As soon as Cassis wanted to know what she was doing there, Evelina heard Paul calling her and asking her where she was and saying how well she was hiding that he couldn't find her. Evelina grabbed Cassis by the arm and dragged him away before he realized what she had done and what she was trying to accomplish. But she just shushed him and told him to be quiet because Paul could hear them. Evelina squirmed as she heard Paul's voice again, but much closer, and he was telling her it was useless to hide. But soon Paul realized that she wasn't here and decided to leave, so she could relax a little. Putting her hand on her chest, she exhaled and thought about how scared she was, and her heart was pounding like crazy, but suddenly she noticed that her heart was calm. She couldn't understand what that pounding sound was and whose heart it was. Suddenly she looked in front of her and saw that she was in Cassis's arms, and it was his heart that was pounding so frantically. She couldn't believe that all this time she had been clinging to Cassis, and when he told her to get off him, Evelina pushed him away out of surprise. Evelina realized that she did it very sharply, and he hit the closet, but she also blushed and felt it with her palms and knew that she should not be embarrassed and blush. Like in the novel, she was afraid that she would fall in love with Cassis, and she had trained since childhood to win by looking at portraits of handsome men. Now she tried to insinuate that it was only because she was playing hide-and-seek. Evelyn hurriedly apologized and said that she didn't mean to push him away so harshly, but he grudgingly said that she was a bore, and Cassis stood up and began to shake himself off and straightened up, and told her that he hated people like her. He also told Miss Evelyn that the library was not a place to hide, but a place to read books. Evelyn couldn't believe he had just told her off. Just as Evelyn was about to be outraged, Paul appeared from behind the closet behind her and said loudly that he had found her, and then he saw the little master, even though he didn't expect to see him here. Suddenly, when Cassis saw Paul, he smiled the nicest smile and held out his hand to Evelyn, saying that her clothes were dirty and she should have been more careful, and asking her to grab his hand so he could help her up. When Evelyn reached out her hand to him, she couldn't believe what was happening and couldn't understand what had suddenly happened to him. When she got up from the floor, she thanked Cassis, and then he went to the exit of the office and told Evelyn that he was leaving, and they could go on having fun. And then Paul said that the little master should rest, and Evelyn could not understand what was wrong with this guy. Later, however, Evelyn thought, Cassis hated her, but she could not understand why he hated her, instinctively feeling that she was the villain of the original, because from the very first meeting until the incident in the office, Evelyn thought that he was arrogant to her. Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted, and suddenly she heard someone calling out to her, and then she answered. It was Elisa, and she was worried about what had happened to her friend, because she had seen her in the clouds, and so she wanted to know what had happened. Evelyn said that she was just having some thoughts, and Elisa was curious and wanted Evelyn to share them with her. Evelyn hesitated and asked Elisa if she had ever been hated for no reason, but Elisa was very surprised and asked her directly who had tormented her friend. Elisa started to ask her friend who it was. Maybe it was her guest from the capital, but Evelina was quick to tell her that it wasn't like that, and it was nothing like that. She also said that it was nothing important, and offered Elise to taste the cake. Then she poked a piece on a fork, and after tasting it, said that it was very tasty, and urged Elise to try it. While Evelina was chewing the cake carefully, she thought it was very dangerous, and she almost got the main characters into a fight. After taking a cup of tea, Evelina thought that this behavior was so similar to Evelyn's from the novel, so she should have been more careful. Evelina made a decision that whatever Cassis thought of her, she would continue to study him. Mostly, she saw him in the gardens and offices, but most of all, he spent time in the library. Evelyn thought it looked as if he had nothing to do but walk or read, and thought that someone must have seen him leave Montes, and whether he was as malleable in the original. Suddenly, Evelyn was pierced by a headache that always happened when she tried to remember something about her past life. To be honest, she had almost forgotten the content. She remembered everything from when she was a child, but she couldn't write it down, and if there was a clue somewhere, she was sure she would remember it right away. At that time, Evelina came to the garden where her mother was waiting for her and called her to show her that she had come. When Evelina came to her mother, she saw that there was a cake on the table, and then her mother told her to sit down. When Evelina sat down at the table and tasted the cake, she said that it was delicious chocolate flavor. Suddenly, her mother called Evelyn and asked her if she was already friends with Cassis, and Evelyn said she didn't know, because it hadn't worked out yet. Evelyn's mother told her that Cassis was suffering from a heart disease, although Evelyn thought he was just sick, but as it turned out, he was sick to his heart's content. Evelyn realized that when you were sick for a long time, the disease began to progress. Mana insensitivity was a disease that Cassis suffered from that made it difficult for his body to absorb mana from the environment. Mana insensitivity is a two-way street if you can handle infinite mana, but if you can't, you will suffer excruciating pain and die. Of course, Cassis was the main character, so he wouldn't die, but still he suffered in pain. While Evelyn sat pensively looking at the cake, her mom said that if a cute girl like her came up to him, Cassis would like it. Evelyn didn't think so and said she had circumstances. Then her mom asked if she would eat another piece, and then Evelyn said yes, and her mom said she should take it to Cassis and eat it together. Evelyn at first. And when she realized what her mother had said, her mother protested. Her mother laughed and said that Evelyn would have to give him the piece, so if she wanted more, she would have to share it with him. Then the maid quickly took Evelina by the arm, and in her other hand she took a piece of cake and quickly dragged her to Cassis. Evelina didn't even realize how it all happened, but she was standing in front of Cassis in his room. The boy was sitting in his bed reading a book, and as he was interrupted, he wanted to know what Evelina was doing here. But before she could say anything, the maid replied, holding out a box that Evelina had said she would like to eat the cake with him, although Evelina didn't remember when she had said it. Then Cassis, hearing the word cake, quickly agreed and even put the book aside. The maid hurriedly left his room and wished them to enjoy their tea party. After a while, they sat down at the tea table, and Evelyn suggested that Cassis start eating, but he irritatedly said that she should eat the cake herself. Then Evelyn realized that he too would prefer to eat alone. She also noticed that he only pretended to be kind and mature in front of adults, and only treated her well because she had a maid with her. She didn't understand why she had to worry about him, and reached for the cake with her fork and broke off a piece and brought it to her mouth and began to eat it, telling Cassis that she would eat it all by herself. Cassis, looking at this picture, said that usually they asked twice, but Evelina asked once and thought it was enough, and said that he was like a child, and maybe he needed to say it a third time. She looked up and looked at him and realized she had said it out loud. Evelina poked another piece of cake on her fork and held it out to Cassis, asking if he wanted to eat it. He immediately turned away and told her not to make him ask a second or third time, but Evelina insisted that the cake was delicious and he had to taste it. After a short persuasion, Cassis turned to her and stood up and took her hand with the fork and put a piece of cake in his mouth. Cassis was very surprised at the stunning taste of the cake, and then Evelina realized that he was just being sly. Evelina also told him that if it was dry, he could drink milk, and she reached for the cup with the milk in it. Cassis grabbed the cup and said that he didn't need to be taught because he knew it himself. Just when Evelina wanted to warn him, Cassis coughed and started to hiccup because it was hot. He started waving his hands and pushing a stream of air into his mouth to make him feel better, but it didn't help. And from this ridiculous situation, Evelyn started laughing, but not with malice. And when Cassis felt a little better, he pouted and told her to shut up, but Evelyn continued to laugh. In the late afternoon, a carriage was rushing through the streets, and the coachman was telling the Count that they would soon arrive at the place, and the Count nodded approvingly. The Count also smiled to himself and said in his ear that his daughter would wait for him as her father would soon be there. In the morning, the Count announced his arrival, and Evelyn heard his voice and rushed up the stairs and ducked into his arms, rejoicing that he had finally arrived, and asked him how his business trip was. The father picked up his daughter in his arms and asked if she missed him, and she said yes. While he was hugging Evelyn, he scratched her with his stubble, and it was not very pleasant for her because she could not get used to it. Later, the Count had a dinner party with his wife, his daughter, and Cassis. The Count asked Cassis if he was used to life here, and he answered yes, because thanks to the care of these two, he was doing very well. The Countess was very happy because they had worked hard for this dinner and asked them to eat more. The father said that his daughter should eat too, and then she started to taste everything. Evelyn was also watched by Cassis, who watched the Countess talking nicely to her daughter and pointing out that she had eaten too much and offering to help her clean up the leftovers. The Count also suddenly said that it would be nice to have a party for Cassis's arrival, which surprised Evelyn, but he wanted a party since they didn't have one, and thought it would be nice to have one to introduce the neighbors. The Countess thought it was a great idea, and Cassis would be able to make friends with his peers, but Cassis decided to object, and then the Countess wanted to know what happened. As soon as the Countess started waiting for an answer, Cassis clenched his hand into a fist and smiled, and said it was nothing, he was just trying to say thank you for their warm hospitality. Evelina looked at him and didn't understand what was going on, because since they had talked about the party, he hadn't touched the food, and then the girl thought that he didn't like the idea of the party. Regardless of his preference, the day of the welcoming ceremony happened very soon. When the party started, Maid May was finishing helping Evelyn with her hair, and Evelyn looked stunning when she was ready and thanked the maid for her help. Montes was a rural estate far from the capital, but quite large. It was also known as a resort area, and many nobles moved here. When Evelyn went down to the ballroom, she noticed that almost all the local aristocrats were here, and she saw Cassis, who was with her father. Looking at the boy, she thought he was nervous about being stuck among the adults and thought about helping him. Evelina went over to him and took his hand and called out to the man in the green suit, who recognized Evelyn and said that she had a beautiful dress and that it suited her well. She was glad that the dress had made such an impression and said that her dad had picked it out for her. Evelina asked her father if she could take Cassis away to introduce him to her friends, and the count said that of course she could do that. And leaning over to the boy, he also told him to forgive him for keeping him among the adults and told him to go and have fun with the boys. Cassis was grateful for his attention and concern. Then the boy turned to Evelyn, showing that he was ready to go. As they walked down the hallway, Evelyn said that that was why the kids at the party were not in the hall, but in another room, and probably most of them were there now. Suddenly, Cassis stopped and snatched his hand from Evelyn's and blushed and began to resent her for grabbing his hand the last time she had grabbed his hand and pressed herself against him, as if she had no fear at all. Come to think of it, every time she touched Cassis, he had that reaction, so he probably didn't like the body contact. Evelyn squirmed in discomfort and asked him to forgive her for this habit of grabbing his hands, because she didn't know what he didn't like, and it was unintentional. He turned away, slightly pleased that she was admitting her mistake, but he couldn't understand how it was necessary to understand the advantages and disadvantages. Evelyn also noticed that the boy's ears were always red in awkward situations, and she said so in her voice. Cassis asked her indignantly what she was talking about and touched his ears and said it wasn't so. Evelyn understood and said that they had to go already as they were waiting for them, and took him by the sleeve, only he wanted to be indignant again as he saw that she had not touched him in any way, and so he agreed and followed her. When they got to the right room, Evelyn announced their arrival and said that it was them, and at the same moment a couple of guys who were so tired of waiting for them ran up to Cassis. Evelyn looked at the boy and saw how confused he was, because where else could he experience such closeness? The children living here in Montesa were all neighbors across the bridge, and unlike the capital's nobility, few discriminated in status. Of course, not all the children here were like that. As Evelina looked around at the children, she saw one person among them and didn't understand what she was doing here. Her name was Duna Vanessa. As the Marquise's daughter, she had been Evelyn's best friend in the original story, and now Evelyn was the first to distance herself from her. This was because Luna and her society was of low quality. Evelyn didn't know how it would affect their friendship with Elisa if she joined them. She decided to ask Luna what she was doing here, and she said that she just came because they hadn't seen each other in a while, but Luna looked too deceitful for that. Luna promptly went to greet Cassis and told him that she had been in the capital for a while just like him, and she asked him if he liked marinated cookies because they were from the most famous pastry chef in the capital. Evelina was annoyed that they had gotten together to talk about the capital. Cassis also said that he liked the cookies too, and then Luna said that he could come to her any time since she had plenty of them, and he agreed, and that made Evelyn even angrier, and she didn't understand why his attitude towards her was so different. She also thought that he was always straightforward when she was with him, but apparently he was rude to her and not to the kids. Luna also told Cassis that she had seen him, and he wondered when she might have seen him, and she said that she had seen him last year at the Crown Prince's birthday party. Cassis said in a less cheerful voice that he didn't remember that then. Luna said that they even met then, and how could he not remember? Then he said again in an almost icy voice that he didn't remember that. Then he just turned around and left Luna, and she remained upset, and even let out a tear at how rude he had become, and then Evelina called him. Just when Evelina wanted to go to Cassis, Luna, who was obviously upset, walked by her and said she was going to get some fresh air, and at the same moment the door creaked open, and Evelina was called by Elisa, who was about to enter the room. At the same moment, Evelina realized that it was the same fateful meeting of the two main characters of the novel. Elisa immediately came up to Evelina and asked her when she had come to meet her, and then Evelina realized that she just couldn't stand it and went out to meet Evelina and said that they had missed each other last time too. Elisa said that she was just afraid she would get bored walking. Then Evelina said that Elisa always had the same excuse, and Elisa just giggled. Evelina thought that here she was seeing someone new, and now their gazes were assessing each other. Cassis was catching her eye from afar, and Elisa was shining on her own. Their aura was different from the others, and apparently it was because they were the main characters anyway. She had to play the role of a bridge between them. Evelyn was already leading Elisa to meet Cassis, since she had already told her about him and the guy had decided to introduce himself. But Alice only sighed sadly with a kind of disdain at the realization that it was him, that rascal Cassis. Neither Cassis nor Evelina had expected this, and Evelina had no idea what had gone wrong. Then Evelina thought that maybe it was like one girl out of 1,000 who didn't fall in love with him at first sight and slapped him. But he fell in love with her because of that and offered to go out with her. Alice immediately asked him if he hated Evelyn, because if he did, she deserved to be treated well, and then Evelyn realized that it wasn't like that at all. She couldn't understand what was wrong with Alice, and then she remembered how they were sitting together, and Evelyn was sad and said that maybe someone hated her, and she couldn't believe it was because of those words. Alice had insisted that he answer her, but Cassis didn't even know what to say, or even what he was supposed to say. Evelina yanked her friend's arm and whispered to her to calm down and stop because she didn't mean anything by it. Elisa pulled away from her friend and said that it was a lie, and she would never have seen her so gloomy. But even Evelyn wasn't quite sure that she hadn't been gloomy then. In her heart, Evelyn was ready to explode because she tried to think that she couldn't have messed up the first meeting of the main characters like that, and shouldn't Cassis have dealt with it? Then Cassis asked what was wrong with Evelyn and asked why she was saying that he hated Evelyn. Then Alice said that it was a shame that he hated her for no reason. But Evelyn couldn't remember when she had said that. Cassis turned to Evelyn and said that he didn't know she had thought that about him, and he didn't hate her at all. He smiled, but Evelyn didn't understand why his smile was frosty. Then Alice was overjoyed, and hugging Evelyn, she said she knew it, because there was no one who hated them, Evelyn. Cassis also reached out to Evelyn and asked her to forgive him, and said that he had been sick, and it looked like he had hurt her unintentionally. Evelyn was shocked, but accepted his apology. Then he squeezed her hand tighter and said that he would be more careful from now on. In the afternoon, Evelina sat in the garden and asked Bobby to listen to her, and told him that Cassis had beaten her 5 times today. Bobby is a black dragon egg that her father bought as a gift during his business trip. When her father arrived, he said it was a black dragon egg, and they said a lot of people liked it, and he wanted to know if she liked it, then she couldn't believe it was for her. Her father didn't know when it would hatch, but if Lin took good care of it, it wouldn't have to wait long. When her father asked if she could look after it, Evelyn said yes, with joy and confidence. The egg looked like a black bean, so she named it Bobby. Elisa came to her and asked how she could call it Bobby, just because it looked like a black bean, even though it was a very telling name. Evelyn was concerned about Alice's reaction when she heard Bobby's name, but she couldn't think of a better name than that. Evelyn judged from his silence that he was probably mad at her too. Evelina also asked Bobby if Cassis was an idiot since he only had a pretty face. After the welcome party, Cassis started manipulating her again. He asked Evelyn to bring him water, but she didn't understand why she had to do it, because he could have ordered the servants to do it. Then Cassis said that he knew she hated him, so she didn't want to bring him water and made a sad grimace. Then he said that he was really sick, and only wasting their food supply, and therefore he was worthy of hatred. And then Evelina agreed, and said that she would bring him water. This boy was sharp in mind and often teased her, and yes, in front of adults he pretended to be very kind to Evelyn. If she told anyone about Cassis's true character, no one would believe her. And then she asked Bobby when she hatched and saw Cassis, he was to question him instead of her. At the time, she had no idea what the consequences of her throwing out words would be. Later, Evelina wondered why she was so steamed about it. Before that, Cassis had told Evelina that there were lilacs outside, and maybe she could bring them to him, but she didn't understand why he suddenly needed lilacs. Then Cassis said that the flowers in the vase were wilted, and he thought that he would soon wilt too. But Evelyn couldn't understand what kind of autumn leaf he was. If Cassis had not been sick, she would have just thrown him into Lake Emil. But eventually Cassis and Elisa would have to return to the capital with a spark in their hearts. But it would take about a year. Yes, 1 year Evelina just had to be patient. It was just a childish whim and nothing could be done about it. When she came to Cassis, he apologized to her because he had mixed up and wanted lavender instead of lilacs. They were both the same color, so he was confused. But he didn't see anything wrong with that, and said he couldn't send her anymore because he had had enough. So she nodded and said she would go, and when she left the room, she leaned on the door and proudly said in a voice that this teenager was playing with the wrong person. In her past life, she had been a kindergarten teacher, and though it had been a long time ago, interacting with children had been a piece of cake for her. Cassius would tell her that he wanted to read a book and wanted Evelyn to bring it to him, then tell her that he was hot and wanted a glass of cold juice, and after that, Cassius still teased her whenever he had time. But one day he turned to her, and she stood by him with a willing and sincere smile and waited for him to say what he wanted or needed, and said she would do whatever he wanted. Suddenly, she decided to touch his forehead, and after a minute she said he must have had a fever. But the touch only made him blush, and he said it was not so, but Evelyn said the windows had been left open, and he had caught a cold, and she called May. When May's maid came, Evelyn told her to get Cassius a glass of warm milk. Cassius slowly took Evelyn's hand off his shoulder and said he didn't need it, but Evelyn took it to mean that he didn't like milk. Evelina offered him green tea instead of milk, but he refused again, but it was too late as she shouted to May to bring green tea. She also told the boy that he was amazing and that she couldn't drink green tea because it was bitter. She thought he was just like an adult. Maybe he was disgusted by the tea, but he knew he needed it, and so he drank it. Cassius, who was sitting next to her, was watching her and already thought that she, not he, was the one who was sick. Evelina also decided to ask the maid for her opinion, and she said that the young gentleman was really amazing. Then he just nodded, and Evelina realized that he didn't like green tea either, and it made her sad. She thought that he just thought that she was just silently tolerating, but in the meantime, she was studying Cassius. After a while, May brought green tea, but when she tasted it, he really wanted to fiddle with it. May decided to ask him if he liked the tea, and then he thanked her with a smile. But Evelina knew he was just pretending that he was fine. Evelina sat just across from Cassius, and reaching a hand to her face, she pulled back an eyelid and stuck out her tongue, teasing him as she outdid him this time. May saw the young gentleman's face change and asked what was wrong with him and if he was even okay. Later, Evelina was walking down the corridor thinking about how she and Cassius would have fun today. But suddenly, she saw him ahead of her. Evelina immediately caught up with him, and after saying hello, she decided to ask him if he had anything to do today, and he flinched in surprise. Evelina smiled the most sincere smile and said that she was just worried about him because he was sick. For the first time, he calmly asked Evelina to stop, but she didn't understand what his reaction was, and today he was especially pale, and then she thought he probably wasn't feeling well. Evelina stood in front of him and held up his sleeve and asked him if he was not feeling well, but he wryly asked who it could have been, and in one sharp movement pulled his arm out and told her to stop bothering him. Evelina looked at her hand and realized it was still hot from his touch, and wondered if it was normal to have such a temperature, and it was dangerous to leave him alone. Only she wanted to stop Cassius and offer help, as she saw that he had just fallen to the floor unconscious. Later, when Cassius was already in bed, Evelina sat beside him and wondered what she had done to the sick child. Cassius's doctor said that he had lost consciousness because of the mana buildup in his body, and she thought that if he had taken the medicine on time, he wouldn't have had so much mana buildup. She also remembered that Paul had told her that Cassius had been taking the medicine properly, so it was possible that the medicine was just not working anymore, or that he had stopped taking it. When she worked at the kindergarten, she often saw children who pretended to take the medicine in front of their teachers for fear of being scolded, and secretly spit out the pill behind the teacher's back. Then Evelina got up from her seat and went to the nightstand, for she knew that they were usually hidden there. And when she opened one of the drawers, she saw that they were indeed there. He must have spit them out because they were very bitter and he hated bitter things. She sat down next to him again and thought that if she told the adults about it, he would be in trouble, so she decided to wait until he woke up and listen to his explanation first. Suddenly, he groaned, and she thought he was in a lot of pain and decided to call out to him, hoping he would at least open his eyes or signal that he heard her. He grabbed her hand and called for her mother. Evelina was even more wary when she called for him, because she wanted to understand what was wrong with him and thought he was very sick. He began to sweat a lot, and also to cry through his sleep. He called his mother and said that he was guilty and asked his mother not to leave. Then Evelina didn't understand why he called her mother if she was Evelina, and realized that he mistook her for his mother because of the fever. She decided that it was right to comfort him and tell him that his mom was there for him and pretending to be her, She said that she would not leave him and would not go anywhere. She also said that that was why he had to take it easy and get a good night's sleep so he would get better. Apparently, he was very ill and missed his mother very much. He was still a child, and it was hard for him to live away from his parents. But by the way, she wondered if the Dukes of Urkio were in first love. Since he was special to his parents, they should have appeared in the novel at least once, but the Duke and Duchess of Urkio never appeared in First Love. Later, when he shows up for Elisa, he will be a full-fledged Duke. I wondered if this meant that the Urkio couple might have died. Of course, the Duke could have brought him into the title earlier, but since that had not happened, there was a possibility that he might have died. Suddenly, the migraine came again, and Evelina clutched her head. She must have been too deep in her memories, but she decided that it didn't matter now. That boy had been an angel while he slept, if you thought about it. He was just a kid pretending to be an adult, and it seemed that Evelina was being too hard on him. Evelina wanted him to get well soon so he wouldn't be in pain. Later, Cassis opened his eyes and looked out the window, and realized that it would be dawn soon, and he wondered how long he had been out. He also noticed that his body was no longer weighing him down, and that Cliff must have done something about it. He thought that if he had, it must have reached his father's ears, for his father had instructed Cliff to look after Cassis. Turning away from the window, he thought he should have been more careful. But then he had a different feeling, and peering into the darkness, he saw Evelina, and didn't know what she was doing here. He noticed that she was sleeping with her mouth wide open, and so he realized that there was no such thing as a perfect baby. Evelyn Monstera was loved and cherished, and he still couldn't forget how she had greeted him at his mother's skirt when he had first arrived here. He himself had never felt such warmth for his mother. In the end, he didn't live up to her expectations and was sent here. Then he wondered if he was going to die soon if his parents would smile or cry, though not his parents probably didn't care at all. It was for this reason that Cassis stopped taking his medication, as he thought he was hiding the pain well. Cassis took a strand of her hair with his other hand, and running it through, thought how this little girl immediately recognized his condition. He called out to Evelina and asked her to forgive him for his constant nagging, but he didn't know what to do, because as soon as he saw her, he was so jealous and bullied her. Every time he teased her, it was fun to see how she reacted and fussed, so he asked her to forgive him in advance because playing with her made him live a little longer. Evelina opened her eyes and realized that her arm was numb from how uncomfortable she had been sleeping, and she hadn't even noticed she had fallen asleep. Then she decided to stretch and think about what time it was. When she looked at Cassis, she didn't think he could still be asleep. She reached out her hand to him. She wanted to check if he was asleep, or if he couldn't be dead, but suddenly he opened his eyes and asked what she was doing. Evelina bounced away from him in fright and said that he scared her, and he could have let her know he was awake. But Cassis couldn't understand why she would touch a sleeping man's face. She explained that he didn't wake up and she was beginning to think he was dead, but now she knew he wasn't, and asked her to come over here. She also decided to ask why he hadn't taken his medication, but he thought it was nonsense, and Paul had taken care of him. But Evelina told him not to lie because she had seen everything under the bed. As she looked at him, she thought he didn't want to be honest with her at all. She exhaled heavily and said that the medicine was a little bitter, so he just didn't want to take it, and it had a good cumulative effect, but it was hard to eat, and Evelina understood. However, she didn't want to see him fall down after spitting out his medicine again. His parents who were taking care of him were also in a quandary. Then she asked if he hated pills that much, and Cassis nodded his head and said he couldn't stand them. It couldn't be helped, and then Evelina suggested that if he took the medicine, she would get him some cookies and pickle or whatever he wanted. But he asked who needed it, and Evelina told him not to pretend, because he was very fond of sweets. She also said that if he didn't agree, she'd have to go to Cliff's with a basket of pills from under the bed. That's when Cassis realized she was threatening him. She didn't understand what kind of threat she was talking about, because it was for his own good, and what that sad voice was all about. He threateningly said that she should not lie to him because she hated him and pestered him all the time. But she did not pester him, but she thought that he guessed it. Evelina also said that he had to take the medicine, no matter how bitter it was. Otherwise, he would faint all the time like today, and then everyone would worry. Cassis said that nevertheless, and there was no guarantee that he would get better on the medicine. She realized that he was acting like an adult, and she had no idea, but he was scared. Scared that something could go wrong and scared of dying. Evelina asked if she would tell him that he would surely get better. but Cassis asked skeptically how she would know since she wasn't Cliff. Then she said with a suspicious smile that he was the main character, but that he was still very young and the children recovered very quickly, so he would recover soon. Then he said that it was the first time he had heard that. Cassis turned away from her and covered himself with a blanket he lay on the other side and told her to forget and what he expected from her. But now that she saw that he was conscious, he would leave or continue to sit with him. And this he said to the one who had been sitting next to him all night. Evelina said he could at least thank her, then he quietly told her thank you. Cassis turned his face into his pillow and blushing thanked her for taking care of him all night and said he would sleep a little longer. Then Evelina nodded approvingly and wished him good dreams. When she left his room, she leaned against the door. She thought it was with him. He even thanked her, and yet he wasn't angry. After that day, she made sure he took his medication every day, and thankfully Cassis was no longer causing trouble. Paul was glad Miss was here too, and asked what his master wanted. As Cassis's condition improved, Evelina was faced with an almost forgotten problem, and that problem Cassis and Elisa never became friends. In first love, their fate was love at first sight, and it was strange that here Cassis showed no interest in Elisa. The first meeting was so dry that she wondered if she had correctly identified the main characters, and after that, they never became interested in each other. Evelina didn't understand why she had told Elisa that someone hated her, and it didn't seem to be going anywhere. For the sake of her cozy life, they had to fall in love, and so she could not stand aside and thought how she could get them interested in each other. To form a fateful attraction between them, she had been organizing tea parties for the last few days so that they would spend more time with each other. She also took Cassis, a homebody, outside and set up random meetings with Elisa. She tried everything. She tried her best, but there was no result. Suddenly, her mom called her and wanted to know what her daughter was thinking since she had called her several times. Her mother told her to look out the window as they had already arrived, and when Evelina looked, she was amazed at the beauty of the temple she saw from the window. This weekend, the whole family was invited to visit the temple, and all thanks to a large donation to the temple from her father. The temple was built in Hizay near Montes, and it was famous for its magnitude, so she was very excited to visit the temple, and there was also a mage abbot at the temple, so Cassis decided to go with them. When they entered the temple, Evelina was delighted with the architecture and the scale of its construction, and she thought that the temple was like a royal palace. Also, the size of a castle usually symbolized wealth and power, and the luxury of a temple was a sign of a poor life. Somehow, Evelina felt there was a discrepancy here. They were met by a young lad who said they had arrived early, but thanked Count Monster and the others for coming all this way. Evelina had seen him come running quickly to greet them on the doorstep, and so she suspected her father had made a very large donation. The boy said that His Eminence's mass was delayed, so they would have to wait, and they also asked about the sick child, and then the count said it was Cassis. The boy also said that he was glad to meet him, and said that the abbot mage was preparing now, and asked them to come through. When they went inside the temple, the count noticed that something was wrong with Cassis, and asked him what was wrong. Maybe he was uncomfortable, and Cassis said that it wasn't that. He was just sorry that he had caused them so much trouble, and that they had wasted their time traveling here with him. Cassis asked him to forgive him, but the count just put his hand on his head and stroked him almost fatherly, and said that when he came here, he became a part of their family, and when their son was sick, his parents, of course, traveled with him. So the count asked him not to say such things again, and Cassis nodded and thanked him. Evelina saw all this and smiled at what she saw. Then the count turned to his wife and asked if they would go on. The guy approached Countess White and asked if she wanted to wait in the VIP lounge, but she said that she would go to the prayer room for now and declined his offer. Mrs. White asked her daughter if she wanted to go with her, and Evelina happily said yes. When Evelina and her mom went to the prayer room while her mom was praying, Evelina thought that even if she was her mom, she was very pretty. But suddenly she heard the sound of footsteps and thought someone had come in. Evelina turned around at the sound and saw a blue-haired boy with amber eyes standing in the entrance, and she wondered who it was. He looked to be her age, but he was wearing priest's clothes, and he kept looking at Evelina, and she thought he might have something to say. White told her daughter that they could leave, and Evelina, not expecting her mother to talk to her, replied sharply that they could go. And then her mother asked what was wrong with her. But Evelina quickly said that nothing was wrong, and said that someone was looking at her but there was no one there. Her mom looked where her daughter was pointing and said there was no one there, and Evelina thought it was nonsense because there was someone there just now. When they got up from their seats to leave, the mother said that maybe she had taken a nap, and it looked like the mother had tired her daughter out waiting, but Evelina claimed that she hadn't slept. Mom then said that they were already late for dinner, and so they should hurry up, but Evelina kept thinking that there was really and definitely someone there. Duck steaks with orange wedges awaited them for dinner. The head priest thanked them for their journey and said that their table was not very rich, but he asked them to help themselves. Evelina looked at the food and thought, how could anyone say their table was not very rich? But it looked like they had worked their asses off to try, and so she wondered if her father had sacrificed too much. Evelina turned to Cassis and asked how he was feeling, and asked the priest who was interested in him if he was really a wizard. Cassis answered that he doubted it, because he didn't feel much change. At one point, Cassis blushed and told her that she was too close, but she asked how she should whisper and asked him not to make things up for himself. The older priest watched their whispering and at one point said that their daughter had grown up a lot. The count was surprised that he remembered Evelina, and the countess remembered that it was he who had baptized her then. The senior priest said that it was rare for a child to be so calmly immersed in holy water, and so it was well remembered, and perhaps God was especially fond of the young lady. Mrs. White knew that his daughter did not remember him, but they came to Hesea to baptize her immediately after her birth. The count said that he was so surprised that Lin stopped breathing as soon as she was immersed in the holy water, and the countess confirmed this and said that they realized later that she was just asleep. The senior priest also said that Evelina was probably the only baby who fell asleep so peacefully as soon as she touched the holy water. The count said that the next day or so she was able to turn over for the first time, and then he cried with joy and couldn't even understand how Lin, who had only recently been a baby, had become so big. Evelina said it was all thanks to Mommy and Daddy. Holy water here was the purest water cleansing touching it. A newborn baby is pure, so even in contact with the holy water, he was cleansed without much rejection, and an impure adult would not withstand the action of cleansing and die. No wonder she just slept peacefully while they bathed her. The countess thanked the head priest, for it was all thanks to him, and their daughter had grown up like this because of his efforts. His Eminence thought they would have a good year thanks to the Count and Countess of Monster, but Evelina looked at the root and realized that he was just asking for more donations. And by the way, Evelina decided to ask if they had a priest her age, and His Eminence said he wasn't sure, but it could have been one of the trainees, and asked if she was looking for someone, and Evelina said she just thought she saw someone. The junior priest approached His Eminence and said that he was in charge of training the trainees, and if she told him what he looked like, he could bring him in. Evelina was very surprised and unprepared for this, and said there was no need to bring anyone, and said it was a boy with blue hair and amber eyes. The junior priest was surprised at first, and then said that there was no such child among his students. But Evelina had seen someone dressed as a priest, but His Eminence interrupted her and said that sometimes there were children who wanted to experience what it was like to be a priest for a while, and Miss had probably seen one of them. Evelina lowered her head sadly, and then the head priest looked out the window and said that it was quite late, and asked if they could spend the night here and come back tomorrow. The Count and Countess said that they did not mind, and were grateful, and thanked His Eminence for his concern. So they stayed in the temple for one day, and according to the local rules, each of them settled in a male and female dormitory. Evelina, sharing a room with her mother, thought the guest room would be small, but it was quite spacious. Her mom suggested that they make the bed first. When they made the bed and went to bed, her mother wished her daughter to sleep well, and Evelina said goodnight to her mother. Already later in the middle of the night, Evelina growled with anger at herself for not sleeping. Evelina got out of bed and thought it was because of the change of scenery, and since she hadn't slept, she decided to at least go out for some air. Evelina went out to the courtyard and admired the statue of a maiden holding a jug and having wings. Suddenly, Evelina was attracted by some sound, and she moved her gaze to the bushes that were near her, and out of anxiety, she asked what was there or who was there. The girl went to those bushes and saw the same boy with blue hair, and he noticed that he was seen and started to run away. Then she called him because she did not understand why he was running away. Evelina started to chase him and ran after him. She managed to grab him and they fell together. When she turned him over, he began to apologize to the fairy and said that he did not want to steal, and the girl did not understand what fairy he was talking about, and then asked why he apologized. When he opened his eyes, he didn't understand what was going on. They came and sat on the curb in front of the entrance. Evelina gave him a handkerchief and apologized and said she didn't want to scare him. She just wanted to talk. He didn't understand why she wanted to talk to him at all. At that moment, Evelina thought why he looked so much like a puppy and told him that he had been looking at her very intently in the prayer room during the day. The boy cried again and apologized to Fairy. She was surprised and said that he could certainly look at her a little, but why he was apologizing again was not clear to her. She did not understand why he called her a fairy, and then he seemed surprised that she was not. But the boy said that she glowed, and even now there were sparks and stars all around her. Then Evelina thought it was like a declaration of love at first sight. But anyway, she was not a fairy, and she said her name was Evelina Monstera and wanted to know what his name was. Suddenly, they were only being called out and asked what they were doing there, and then Evelina and her new friend turned around at the voice. When they turned around, Evelina saw that it was Cassis who was looking at them with an upturned eyebrow. The blue-haired boy stood up and apologized very loudly and immediately ran off around the corner. Evelina didn't have time to do anything and yelled at him to at least say his name. There was a silence while Evelina looked after the boy, but Cassis interrupted her by asking her if she knew the boy, and she said that she didn't, but that they had met today. Suddenly, he took off his robe and threw it over Evelina's shoulders and said that they should go back outside because it was cold, and it was night and she was a child. But Evelina reminded him that he had also gone out at night. He grudgingly said that he should have been vigilant, but she was surprised that he was telling her. Then he gave her a slap and said that she was too trusting of strangers. He took her by the sleeve and, dragging her behind him, said it was very dark and he would walk her out. She was still surprised at his behavior, that now he was taking care of her like an older brother. If only he had acted like that in normal life, as if yesterday he had been angry when she had grabbed his arm. But it seemed that now they were getting closer. But then his ears were red and it was so cute, and at the same moment she realized that she had accidentally grabbed his hand again. Cassis had told her not to grab his hand, and now she thought she should have let him go faster. But just as her hand started to slip out of his, he grabbed it himself. Cassis immediately said, without turning around, said that if she was scared, she could hold his hand. But just when she wanted to remind him of his own words, she saw that his ears were red again, and she decided to keep quiet. She didn't do it because of fear, but she was a little embarrassed, so she couldn't say a word. In the morning, Evelina got a knock on her door and was told that she had received an invitation from Luna Vanessa. When the servant came in, she said that she was throwing a party for a friend from the capital. Evelina began to read the letter, which said that soon her close friend from the capital would be coming to their house, and she wanted to throw a huge party, and so she asked Evelina to come along with Cassis to brighten up the evening. Evelina was shocked at how she could be so direct. It was also surprising that she was not yet disappointed in her friendship with Cassis, and she thought Cassis had gotten an invitation too. Evelina burst into his room and asked him if he had gotten an invitation, but Cassis only said hello to her and was surprised that she had burst in just to ask. She thought he said yes, but he stared at the book and replied that he didn't want to go by the invitation. He hadn't been much of a party person before, and he'd been to the original one sometimes, or Evelina's memory was failing her. Evelina asked if he hated parties, and Cassis asked why she asked that question, and Evelina said that last time her dad had thrown a party, but he didn't like it much either. Cassis asked if Evelina liked parties, and she thought about the delicious food and the elegant music and the wonderful people around her. Evelyn even remembered that there was a time when Philip was so full he couldn't stand up, and it was very funny. Evelina said that parties were fun, and sometimes funny things happened. Then Cassis said that she was fine because she could enjoy herself, and since she was having so much fun, she could go by herself. Only she wanted to explain herself as Cass chased her away and said he was tired and wanted to rest. This was not the mood Evelina wanted to go to the party in. After that conversation, she felt very uncomfortable around Cassis, and they never talked until now. Only the children of the highest aristocracy were invited to Luna's party, so Evelina, the Baron's daughter, was not invited, and only she and Philip were invited. This time, she didn't really want to go, and she was more concerned about Cassis, But as the daughter of the Count, she couldn't refuse the invitation of Luna, the daughter of the Marquis. Evelina saw Luna and said hello to her and thanked her for the invitation. Luna in turn greeted Evelina and Philippe. Luna wondered where Cassis was, and Evelina replied that she was not looking for him too obviously, and said that he had not been well today and had been told that he was resting at home. Luna was surprised and realized there was nothing she could do. Another girl overheard their conversation about Cassis and asked if they were talking about Cassis Ren Urquio. It was Marianne who asked who he was, and then Evelina realized she needed to introduce herself. Evelina introduced herself and was about to introduce Philippe, but when she turned to him, she realized that he was no longer there. Marianne realized that she was the daughter of the Earl of Monster and introduced herself saying that she was Marianne Quilton and she was glad to meet him. In a second, Evelina found Philip's eyes and introduced him and said that he had come with her. Marianne said that her partner was very funny and she was not a beggar and she wasn't going to mess around with food. Evelina kept her temper, for she was above it. Marianne decided to ask how Evelina had met Urquio's offspring, and Evelina answered briefly and coldly, saying that he was just the son of a friend of her mother's. Marianne then thoughtfully said that her mother had been quick, and Luna added that Mrs. Monstera had married and come from the capital and Montes, and it was as if this friend had come before that. Evelina was beginning to be pissed off at this kind of talk, for her mother was not their friend that they should speak of her in such a way and imply something about her. Marianne also suddenly remembered that Cassis had seizures, but Luna didn't know about them and asked her what she was talking about, and Marianne only said that she had left early and hadn't seen her. Marianne also said that at the prince's birthday banquet, Urquio's offspring suddenly had a seizure. She hadn't seen such a rare scene and hoped Luna hadn't either, for Marianne had run away when she saw him shaking with foam in his mouth. Luna didn't even know about it, and she wondered why she was hearing about it for the first time, and Marianne replied that everyone at that party had seen it. Evelina realized why Cassis didn't like parties and didn't like crowds of people, because a child's heart was so easily wounded. She felt sorry for him because she didn't know it either and she had hurt him. Suddenly, Evelina heard Luna saying that it was disgusting because she thought that since he was the Duke's son, she had almost befriended the wretched man. Marianne shushed Luna that she should be more careful because he was the son of Duke Urquio. Luna thought she was right because he would die soon, so there was no reason to regret the connection. Marianne asked how Luna, so naive, was going to punish this harsh social world, and Luna said that she believed Marianne. At the same time, Evelina was getting even angrier and was already clenching her fists, but she realized that she had to be patient. She knew what she was going to go through, but she didn't understand why she was so angry. Evelina couldn't believe that the children were talking about this topic and what it was about. If it was just talk about identity and flaws, and they were talking about it openly in front of her, knowing that she was living with this man. While drinking water, Marianne saw how silent and tense Evelina had become, and decided to ask if she had anything to say. Evelina couldn't hold back and said that the topic of conversation was so delicate that she had nothing to say. At the same time, Cassis stopped reading his book because he was thinking about why he had done that. He didn't want to be angry with the child, but usually Evelina would flare up and make up quickly, and when he took care of her inappropriately, she would get even angrier. Paul went into the room and called the gentleman and asked if he had made up with Evelina yet. But Cassis irritably only asked for tea, and Paul said that tea had already been served. Cassis looked at his watch and thought that they must have already arrived at Vanessa's mansion. For him, parties were a kind of business, a place to build friendships between families. From a young age, he had to follow his parents' advice and get to know everyone, so he never had fun at receptions. He also felt like he was playing pre-planned moves on the board, but Evelina was different. She was very unusual. Maybe it was because she grew up in the country, but she was very different from other girls from aristocratic families. Take, for example, The Baron's Daughter, this ordinary Alice poem. She was always around Evelina fierce and feared Cassis, so he was more worried about Evelina's future. Most noble girls made friends that matched their status by the time of the debut held when they reached adulthood. In the social world, the connections were strength. They were still young and didn't know next to Evelina didn't find suitable family friends, and then how she would debut. Then Cassis shook his head because he didn't understand why he even cared about her debut, and they had a fight. He kept thinking about this little girl, and then he made a decision to either make up or forget. Cassis chose reconciliation and asked Paul where his invitation was. At the party at the same time, Luna was outraged at Evelina's rudeness and demanded that she apologize to the young Marquis of Quilton. And Evelina was amused that it was only at such moments that she remembered her family. Evelina knew she had to crawl away quietly to avoid getting in trouble, but she didn't know how to keep quiet. Marianne came up to Evelina and poked her in the chest with her finger and told her to tell them to their faces that they were scum. But Evelina just stood there silently, and then Marianne pushed her because how dare she? Finally, Evelina said with her head down that Miss Quilton had insulted her beloved family. Marianne laughed at her words about family, and then Evelina said that Cassis was their relative, and her father said that they lived together, then they were family. Marianne claimed that they were family was nonsense, and she understood that Count Monster was a complete fool too, and Evelina was probably just flirting with Cassis. Then Evelina parried and asked what she herself was doing, and asked how she could call a sick child a wretch because people were not commodities, and how she could consider it noble behavior. Many people watched their quarrel, but no one could interfere in their quarrels. Marianne was outraged because, in her opinion, Evelina was now insulting her family. But Evelyn told Marianne Quilton not to misrepresent the matter, for she had not said that. Evelina did not understand how she dared to insult Urquio's son because he looked good. Her family was not higher in rank than hers, and she was not afraid of the consequences, so she had to choose her words. Marianne began to boil, for she knew that Evelina was right, and she did not know how to answer her. So she swung her punch glass at her in anger, for how dare she speak to her like that? At that moment, Evelina was ready to be spilled, because she knew that Marianne would break up and take the glass of grape juice not to drink, but to pour it on Evelina's face. Evelina heard the contents of the glass being poured out, but she didn't understand why she didn't feel anything, and when she opened her eyes, she saw that everyone was shocked and horrified that Evelina was covered by Cassis. She immediately stood in front of him and asked him if he was okay because his shirt was soaked with juice, and Evelina quickly started to wipe him, and only then noticed that she was touching his face. Evelina remembered that he didn't like to be touched, and she quickly removed her hands and apologized. She was only trying to get him wet, and wondered why she always forgot about it. She gave Cassis the handkerchief, and he wiped his face himself, and then Marianne shyly apologized because she did not want to wet him. Then Cassis realized that she was Miss Quilton, and realized how aggressive she was. Then he looked in her direction and asked if she agreed with his statement. But Marianne immediately fell to the floor and said that she was at fault and asked Junior Duke Urquio to forgive him. Fixing her hair, Cassis said that since she knew it was a mistake, she shouldn't have done it in the first place, and went straight to Luna Vanessa and wanted to remind her of what had happened recently. He was referring to the flawed goods, and Luna immediately apologized that she didn't mean it. Evelina didn't recognize him because Cassis was different from usual, and she was even afraid. Cassis turned to Miss Marianne Quilton again and said that he did not tolerate those who treated his people badly. She asked again about his people, and then he clarified that he was talking about Evelina Monster and said that she was his dear family. Then he took Evelina's hand and said that was why she wasn't someone who could be safely abused. Cassis pulled Evelina behind him, and they went out into the garden, and she was thinking all the while how it was that he had said the line that was meant for Elisa, and couldn't remember what scene the line was from, and it was happening at the same time, and why the name in the line was changed to hers. Finally, he stopped, and Evelina wanted to know what was wrong with him. Then he turned to her and asked her to forgive him for being angry with her, and asked her to forgive him for hurting her. Evelina couldn't understand what he was saying, and Cassis wanted to know if she was offended by him, and Evelina said that she wasn't, and that she had to apologize because she didn't choose her words well. That's why she asked Cassis to forgive her for what had come over her, because she didn't know, and Cassis said that she wasn't there then, and it was natural that she didn't know about it. Evelina wondered what would have happened if Cassis had not been there. Then maybe she and not Marianne would have kneeled. But if you think about it, the change of line was not a bad sign, because now there was a chance that, unlike Evelina from the novel, Cassis would not hate her. Evelina decided to ask him if it was true that he had told her that she was a dear family to him. Then Cassis turned to her, and with a gentle smile said that it was true. Cassis smiled so genuinely that she couldn't take her eyes off him. Apparently, because of Cassis's outrage, Luna didn't hurt her. and Marianne soon returned to the capital. Her parents didn't know anything about it. So apparently there were no complaints, but Cassus confessed everything himself, so it was hard for her parents to scold him. Anyway, everything that had happened that day was new and unfamiliar to her, especially his face. But she shook herself from the thought, for what was she thinking, and how could she be charmed by that smile?